Don't care about people calling me on your old number? I'll sort it out. I had just moved to Australia and gotten a new phone, but as it turns out my number was someone else's old number. Every other week I'd get calls from a tradie who wanted to know why I wasn't on site, mate, or what I wanted to be done with building project ABC. Every time I explained at length they got the wrong number, and quite often folks on the other end was rude or thought I was taking the piss and insisted I answered their questions or show up on site. Now, I was over it, so I googled my number and did some digging and eventually found out the guy who had my number before, then his new number, and then I called him. I politely explained my dilemma, and pointed out that there were 2 websites still having his old, my now new, number, and if he could please change this and let his contacts know about his new number and delete the old one as it was getting quite tedious for me. By that time I had used my number for work, visa applications, and landlords and friends, and changing it would have been a huge pain. I explained all of that. Well, of course, he was just as pleasant as most of his contacts and told me something along the lines of, I don't give an F, mate, that's not my effing problem. Get effed, sort your own shot out, mate. Well, the universe provides, and so I got a great opportunity to do just that only a few weeks later. I received a call in the early hours of one morning from another disgruntled guy telling me he was early and demanding to know where I wanted the sand put down and how to get in. I asked what sand was and was told he had a full truckload of sand as ordered and no one was on site and it was all fenced off. Very briefly did I think about launching into my explanation, but I was tired and over it and then realized the opportunity provided. I snapped back at him with no uncertainty. Mate, it's all good, dump it all right in the driveway, front of the fence, we'll sort it out when we get there. The guy said, you sure mate? It's a lot of sand. Me, sure mate, thanks a lot. He, all right then boss, and hangs up. Well, I go back to bed, snoozing for another hour with a big smile until my phone rings again and I see it's old mate with his new number who I had saved when I called him a few weeks ago. I pick up rather chipper and he doesn't waste any time launching into a series of swear words and how he has no access to the site and that he has to move a literal ton of sand by hand and whether or not I told the sand guy to dump it all there. I replied, you told me to sort this out myself, this is me sorting this out. You can remove the numbers and let your contacts know or not. Totally up to you. Mate. He was fuming, called me a few more choice words, promising to find me, and a lot more before we ended the conversation. However, the numbers disappeared from the internet quickly after that and I never got another call again. I still have my number and every time I see a truck with sand I chuckle to myself thinking of this guy moving a ton of sand by hand and losing a fair few hours of labor because he was a douchebag and couldn't be bothered sending a few texts. My appointment was cancelled for being 5 minutes late. I guess I have to reschedule. This happened about 4 years ago when I got a summer job at my university. The job was working for professors that I had worked with before, and they asked me last minute to teach a summer workshop to 9th and 10th graders. So less than 2 weeks before the camp starts I have a bunch of paperwork to do first, including clearances that say I can work with kids. One of these is an official FBI check for which they need my fingerprints. Well, I needed to do the physical fingerprinting right away in order to get the result in time. Luckily I was able to book a fingerprinting appointment for that Friday, booked 24 hours in advance, as required, which would be just barely enough time to get the result. That Friday I catch the subway to campus and it's atrociously slow. I'll admit I should have planned for this, the subway here is always behind. Anyway, I end up slightly late getting to campus so I literally run to the police station and enter the front room at exactly 5 minutes after my appointment time. I know this because, as I stepped through the door, I felt my phone buzz with what turned out to be a "your appointment has been cancelled" email. I speak to the security/cop behind bulletproof glass inside and I learn the appointment was cancelled after he checks my confirmation number. Apparently, they are automatically cancelled if you're not checked in within 5 minutes. Obviously, this is outrageous, but I'm usually a patient guy. I ask if I can book a new appointment. That's no good since it would have to be Monday or later. So I grab a coffee from across the street and return to sit inside the police station, to try and solve this with some Googling while I slip into a more and more frantic state of frustration. I can't find anywhere in the city that can fingerprint me before Monday. But here's what really pushed me over the edge. While I'm sitting there, at this point 30 minutes past my appointment time, someone else comes in for fingerprints. She shows up 5 minutes early. They take her in immediately, and she's out before her appointment was even scheduled to begin. The entire thing took her about 2 minutes. I point out to the cop behind the glass, as politely as I can, that clearly, someone could see me right now because her appointment is already over. Why can't I have the current slot? But, the cop insists that since my appointment was cancelled, my registration info was no longer in the system and I can't be seen today. That's when the idea comes to me and I confirm with him that showing up early is not a problem, because they would have my appointment and registration info in the system. You see where I'm going with this. So I quietly sit back down and take out my phone. About 10 minutes later, I calmly approach him again and say hello, I have a new appointment to be fingerprinted. I'm about 72 hours early. I have never seen such an exasperated sigh in my life. But he checked my new confirmation number and everything was in order. Within 10 minutes, I was walking back out after getting fingerprinted. Sorry, I deleted all the files you told me to delete. My job was to design and write software prototypes for individual high-value customers. If they liked it well enough, then a real software engineering team would build the real product. Occasionally, I would run the prototype for a few months while the customer evaluated if they wanted to buy the real project. Now these prototypes are not a lot of code, but they do run with a lot of data. Even compressed, it can be a terabyte or more. Having done this work for years, I've accumulated a small disk farm of past projects, which can be very useful when a customer asks for something just like we did last year, but with a small change or two. The company resisted buying hard drives for this, but it saves me so much time. I ended up buying 1 or 2 a year myself until I accumulated about 10 of them. A figure of over $1,000 worth of external drives. Then unexpectedly management changes. New management thinks they can replace the old software guy with a cheaper new software grad, and I am laid off, with 2 weeks to train my replacement. Yes, it's blatant age discrimination, but impossible to fight, so I just went for a graceful transition to my next job, except, I have $1,000 of personal disk drives with old customer data on them. The company insists that no ex-employees may take any company data off premises and all files must be deleted. I don't want to just leave the drives at the company, but they insist I must delete all data before taking them home. So I offer, they can buy them from me. I will eventually use them for something else, but I can leave the data on them in case someone needs it. Not good enough. The new manager insists I must delete all data and all backups before I remove the drives. Okay. That's what I do. 6 months later, I get a series of desperate phone calls. New software grad has been unable to build any new prototypes. Old customers are calling to get old prototypes updated, and new software grad has no idea how to do that. Executive VP is calling to ask what would it take to bring me back to do my old job. Sorry, I've got a new job now. And even if I didn't, I cannot just modify the old prototype because you insisted I delete all old copies of it. If I did want to modify it, I'd first have to recreate it from scratch. The code still exists in their source control, but the data is the heart of the prototypes. And that old series of 6 months apart data we collected is gone for good, no matter what. Sorry, you screwed yourselves exactly like I told you would happen. Hope whatever you saved by hiring a new grad to replace an actual experienced programmer was worth it.